Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to part 10 of my Joseph Losey season. Today we're going to talk about Blind Date, aka Chance Meeting, from 1959, starring Hardy Kruger, Stanley Baker, and Micheline Presley. I'll get the technical details out of the way first, because it's a familiar story with these early Losey films. He hated the script, which he tended to do quite a lot of the time, and got his other blacklisted friend Ben Barsman even to kind of help him with the script. Barsman over time would kind of get fed up with Losey bugging him to improve the scripts that he worked with. This time Losey kind of got on with the producer, which again is rare, but apparently he hated the executive producer that was involved. Originally Peter O'Toole was going to play the role that Stanley Baker ended up playing. Losey wasn't that keen on Baker at the time, but also this is one of 4 films that Losey would make with Stanley Baker, so he couldn't have disliked him that much. The film was shot by Christopher Chalice, one of the great British cinematographers, and it looks fantastic. Recently in my Sleeping Tiger video in the Losey series, Studio Canal are releasing that on Blu-ray in a few weeks, the beginning of November. And hopefully Blind Date, because it's got Stanley Baker and Hardy Kruger, hopefully that will get a Blu-ray release at some point as well, because it might have actually replaced The Sleeping Tiger as my favourite of these early Losey films, or pre The Servant if you want to cut it like that. We see the film opens with an upbeat, jaunty, breezy musical score as we follow Hardy Kruger through the streets of London, who's obviously happy. He dances round poles and things like that. He buys a flower, and he rolls up to this apartment whose door is open, and he's looking for somebody called Jacqueline, but doesn't seem to be able to find her. So he sits around, amuses himself, looks around the apartment, which, as always with a lot of these Losey films, is very well adorned with art and paintings and mirrors, which are one of Losey's kind of obsessions, and the camera goes over all these objects as Hardy Kruger gets comfortable, because he's obviously waiting for this woman Jacqueline. But the people that come in are 2 police officers, one played by Gordon Jackson, who ask him what he's doing there, and he's very reticent, doesn't really want to answer questions, not giving anything away. And then in comes Stanley Baker, who's an inspector, and again Kruger doesn't really want to give anything away. They don't tell him why they're here, and he doesn't want to tell them why he's there too. And eventually more and more officers come in and are looking around the apartment, and then eventually Stanley Baker takes him into one of the rooms, and there's a body. The body of Jacqueline. And Kruger is very upset. And the doctor on the scene says she hasn't been dead for long, probably about 5:30, and that's when Kruger has told Stanley Baker that his appointment was for 5:30. So Baker is suspicious, obviously, that Kruger killed her and just stayed there for some reason. And slowly Kruger tells more details about why he's there, and then we get flashbacks of how they met. So I mean, this whole film is kind of a thriller, a murder investigation, but it's actually really about class, as quite a lot of Losey films are. So they first meet at an art gallery where Kruger works. He's only been in London for 6 months. He's a painter from the Netherlands. And this woman who's obviously rich, and they start off, and it's a fairly barbed exchange, because he's very condescending towards the rich and how they just buy art without actually knowing what it's about or whether it's good or not. In their relationship, they happen to bump into each other at the Tate Gallery, and again it's a very antagonistic relationship, but Jacqueline says, well, why don't you teach me about art? Why don't you give me lessons and I'll pay for your rent? He kind of rents a studio from somebody in the afternoons. So they start, and he gives her lessons, even though it's just draw the same thing over and over again, which of course she gets irritated about. But eventually, through their antagonism, they do end up having relations of the biblical sense, even though she's got a husband. There is a very erotic kiss of a shoulder. I had to go and have a cold shower after that. And then it cuts forward and back from the interrogation at this luscious apartment surrounded by all this art. There's plenty of use of mirrors by Losey, again, as a common theme in his films. Jacqueline does say the city is like a mirror. It's a beautiful place when you're happy, and it's not such a beautiful place when you're not. And then more details come out about the death of this woman, and there is a bit of a Hitchcockian twist, which I'm obviously not going to go into. But the film is absolutely wonderful. It doesn't do, the relationship between Kruger and Jacqueline. It isn't your traditional, love at first sight. So the jousting that happens between them and the antagonism between the two of them is very enjoyable to watch. Again, she just kind of uses him when she can see him, and also uses the excuse of her husband, and she has to go to functions and stuff, so she can only see him when it's suitable for her, which obviously Kruger is frustrated with. He can't write letters to her, he can't phone her, so it's literally she just turns up whenever she's free, and he doesn't know when that's going to happen. But as I say, the film is more about class, not just the attitude of the rich to like a struggling artist and can use them whenever she likes, but it also works in the police. So Stanley Baker makes a point of saying, he was the son of a chauffeur. Kruger grew up in a mining town. His dad was a miner, and his granddad was a miner. And obviously there's public school police officers around Baker. So there's a public school guy who comes into the department a little bit later to give Baker a hand. And then we see him surreptitiously making a phone call. And then the assistant commissioner, who is also very posh, turns up and gives Baker a pep talk and perhaps points him in a direction that the police department would prefer the investigation to go into. And then back at the police station, the assistant commissioner, tells Stanley Baker, you're one of our best ones, you're really good at the job, but there's two ways that you either go up or you don't go anywhere. So it's very friends in high places, and obviously Baker is not that kind of person. He drinks milk. How many cops do you see drinking milk? And for me, I said earlier that Peter O'Toole was originally going to play the Stanley Baker character, and I just don't see how that would work, because when Peter O'Toole talks, you don't really get working class out of him. And Stanley Baker just embodies that a whole lot more. Not saying Peter O'Toole couldn't do it, but I just don't think it would work as far as the kind of relationship between Stanley Baker and these obvious public school officers in the police force and bosses in the police force. So the film does work on several levels. Like I say, it's got a really nice little twist. And again, the performances are really good. It's shot beautifully. Again, it's another Losey film that hopefully will get a Blu-ray at some point, because Chalice's cinematography is quite wonderful, especially in the apartment. Again, the use of mirrors, reflections of who people are and who they project to be. There's lots of reflections and double lives going on in this film. So that's Blind Date from 1959. An absolutely wonderful little film, which should get more coverage. Again, we are getting more Losey films, getting Blu-ray releases. As I say, The Sleeping Tiger's coming soon from Studio Canal. So hopefully Blind Date will get a Blu-ray as well, because it's a really good film. So thanks very much for watching part 10 of the Joseph Losey season. We're now going to get into a run of films that are perhaps a little bit more famous than the first 10 I've discussed. So hopefully you'll join me for those episodes too. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.